Okay, so we are live. Brilliant. Right. So today I want to go over Hasan has been grilled by Piers Morgan, and then later I want to look at Biden in his visit to Israel and the things he said. So, but first I want to let's do some context for Hasan. For Hasan being on Piers Morgan, because basically, for anyone who doesn't know, there was an explosion outside a hospital in Gaza, which initially everybody blamed on Israeli airstrikes, which, I mean, to be fair, they're doing a lot of airstrikes. However, Israel denied it and nobody was really sure what had happened. And people nevertheless insisted on jumping to their own conclusions rather than just patiently waiting to find out what's happened. To be fair, we still don't know. It seems like it probably was a misfiring missile, but there are some. I think there's still some doubt. And again, we should all try and wait and be certain about what's happening. Okay, so yeah, basically, so so initially, look, Gaza hospital burns after airstrike kills hundreds, which is what everyone ran with. It was an airstrike and it had killed hundreds. Now, I would have probably, the thing is, if I was a journalist, I kind of wonder, would I have done the same? There's bombs going off everywhere, big explosion. Am I going to start investigating it? I mean, it looks like an airstrike, right? However, it seems like it hasn't been. So anyway, this is what happened. And I don't want to like trivialize it. Whatever happened, people died, and it wasn't good. Okay, that's billions these people. Oh. So this is another point we'll come back to. Whilst again, definitely dozens of civilians were killed. The claim that it was hundreds of people has what came from Hamas, but that it was 500 people. So it may be true. Like that doesn't mean it's from Hamas. It's lies. It might be right, but we don't know yet. And as we'll come to see, it seems like there wasn't enough damage to the hospital proper, not just the car park, which has been destroyed, for that number to be as credible. I don't want to say it's not credible because we do not know. So that's the big fire. So you can see what's going on. You've got the buildings all around, and then you've got fire burning in the car park, which is going to become relevant later. Okay, so that's all we see. So, right, okay, so Hasan and many other people, including the news, you know what, I'm not even going to like bully Hasan. Let's just look at the news ones and all the things that are being said there on Twitter. We're going to see Hasan, Hasan did do a huge stream about it, but I haven't really got time to cover it anyway. And I think it's best to I think it'll be best to just go over a little bit of this and then just crack on with the Hasan on Piers Morgan one. We don't need to go over everything necessarily that Hasan said in the other ones. I mean, we might watch a bit of it. Actually, you know what? Let's find a clip. You know what? That's lazy of me. I'm not going to do that. Let's find a clip. Let's do it. Hasan on. Okay, so Hasan put this up one day ago. What was he saying, like, right at the time, though? I want to know what he was saying at the time. You might delete that, I don't know. Would have been live, wouldn't it? Look at that. Okay, let's just watch that.
Yesterday, an explosion at the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital in Gaza City on Tuesday killed hundreds of people. Gaza's health ministry said the number was 500.
Okay, sorry, we didn't finish covering the. I didn't know what I'm doing. Let's go back to this later. Let's just crack on with this and then we'll watch that. Actually, that's a better way of doing it. Sorry, I leapt into the Hasan thing. Okay, so basically, what's subsequently happened. Yeah, here we go. So what subsequently happened is then Israel have come out and said that they've denied it.
Evening to you. Was it you?
So obviously Hamas have accused Israel. Israel are now coming out and denying it. So let's see.
Apparently not.
we're the whole time gathering more information. And now the highest probability appears to be that this was an Islamic Jihad rocket. And as crazy as that sounds, the statistics are clear. In past rounds of fighting, some 33% of Islamic Jihad rockets that were fired into Israel fell short and landed in Gaza. Now, our intelligence is reporting to us that there was Islamic Jihad fire which was over the vicinity of the hospital, and apparently a rocket malfunctioned and hit the hospital. We had such documented case in the last round of fighting, I think it was in 2021, where everyone said Israeli atrocity, we hit a target, we killed an innocent family, and in the end, we could prove with a video.
See, he is right in what he's saying, that, yeah, there have been times when everyone's blamed Israel, and then it's later come out that it wasn't Israel. However, the reverse has also been true, and remember, they are bombing a lot of civilian targets, so which they claim have legitimate Hamas targets in them. I personally would argue, if you're bombing a school or a hospital, probably just don't. Oh, it's got a Hamas office in it. Just leave it at that point. Unless you're evacuating the building, just leave it. Just because there's a legitimate target in somewhere, and they're using human shields, that doesn't exonerate you necessarily if you bomb it. It doesn't give you carte blanche. Well, they hide all this stuff in civilian areas so we can obliterate Gaza. Right? You just can't do that.
It was their rocket that was launched, and we actually saw the rocket land. Now, of course, in Gaza, there is no independent civil society. The Hamas has ruled there for 16 years, and all the voices that you interview will say Israel, 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 because that's the party line. But I urge...
and they are doing a massive bombing campaign in Gaza and have done repeatedly for a long time. You know, this is the thing. It amazes me when I look at this, how many people are incapable of taking any kind of balanced view, whether they be pro-Israeli, whether they be pro-Palestinian, right? And it's fine to hold any of those positions, really, like if you're doing it in a sensible way, but none of them can take a balanced view. I mean, I realise I'm just bringing myself up, going, yeah, look, I'm criticising both sides. I'm a big clever centrist, which, like, fair play, okay, I'm being a bit of a dick, but I still maintain, right, that it just confuses me how many people can't go, yeah, we don't know what happened, I'm not sure what happened, okay, Israel have done bad things, Hamas have done bad things, there's certainly a disproportionate number of people killed by Israel, but nobody can maintain a sensible position. Either Israel's an insane, maniacal, genocidal regime worse than the Nazis, or Israel's the most kind and lovely and perfect nation that's ever existed, and every Palestinian is a terrorist who has to be punished for Hamas atrocities. And those currently seem to be the two biggest camps out there, the biggest, like, groups. There's a word I'm looking for, I don't know. Those are the two biggest camps, anyway, in this discussion. Sides.
Caution, I urge people to think about this. You've got to hold off judgment. We don't believe it's us. We're still looking, of course, but we don't believe it was us. And all the evidence seems to indicate that this was a rocket fired by Islamic Jihad, that's Hamas's younger brother, its twin terrorist organization. And it was their ordinance. We do not target hospitals. Let's be clear. Israel does not target hospitals.
I
Well,
mean, there are numerous hospitals that have
it's not just the party line, is it? I've stood at the...
Yeah. Mark Regev, he was a former Israeli ambassador to England, is also a big propagandist, and it's important to be very aware of that. So whilst it's starting to look like, as we'll come to see, that he might be right in this instance, the guy's a hardcore propagandist, hence that Israel doesn't target hospitals. You bombed hospitals, I'm sorry. If there were Hamas rockets in a hospital, Israel will bomb it. And then they'll say, well, there were rockets there. So...
the border myself. I've seen your airstrikes on apartment buildings.
Well, maybe they don't target hospitals for no reason, but they definitely target hospitals.
You have the capability to cause utter devastation to the people of Gaza City. That's what's happened tonight. The real fact of it is, whatever is the cause of this, it might be too late. The touch paper has already been lit. Do you understand that?
But if the paper is being lit, to use your metaphor, by a lie, by Hamas propaganda, blaming Israel for something that it didn't do, surely you should be saying that. And we should be trying to make the world understand that Hamas, which has no qualms.
See, again, if they never bombed any other hospitals or anything, they'd have a much bigger leg to stand on, because they go, hey, you just believing terrible things about Israel. And it's like, well, yeah, you didn't bomb this hospital. Well, we didn't bomb this hospital. So, yeah.
It's about killing.
So, yeah, there is a reason people leap to conclusions, but you should never leap to conclusions. And the thing is, this has got me questioning how much we can believe other figures that come out. Because you hear about thousands of deaths, but given the 500 deaths were confirmed, but I mean, don't get me wrong, you've seen the Israeli bombing, I'm sure thousands do die. But if I were less thoughtful, I might start to think, well, if that just came from Hamas and all of the main news organizations believed it, how many other numbers come from organizations like Hamas or just directly from Israel? You shouldn't believe either side in a war. You should try and wait for evidence instead of leaping to go, must be this.
Brutally innocent Israelis has few qualms about lying. Why would they admit that it was a terrorist missile that killed their own people? Of course, blame Israel. But it's our job, and I would say it's your job in the media, to get to the truth and not to parrot just the Hamas position. Israel is responsible for everything that goes wrong. I mean, obviously Hamas will say that.
Well, how quickly can you prove that it wasn't you if it wasn't? The point is that people in places like Ramallah, in fact, across the Middle East, will blame Israel. And therefore, I put it to you that your proof may come too late.
That's possible. I mean, there are people across the entire Middle East who are willing to believe the worst things about Israel and about Jews. They have all sorts of stereotypes, yes, but surely responsible people must hold off judgment until the facts are in, and I urge you to do the same.
He is right there.
Even before this incident, we heard from the World Health Organization today that 2,800 people in Gaza had lost their lives, 11,000 had been injured. Those weren't all misfired rockets. You were causing civilian deaths in Gaza, and many will now say that after this, enough is enough.
So, first of all, I know there's a tragedy unfolding in Gaza. This is a war that has taken too many lives on our side. But those numbers you quote, they stem from the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza. That's where those numbers come from. How many of those were combatants? If you tell me that all those 2,000 were Hamas combatants, I'd say to you, good, that's who we want to kill. But of course, the Hamas Ministry of Health isn't telling you how many were combatants and how many were civilians. And of course, they're telling you, their impression is, oh, they're all innocent people. No. You have to be skeptical. This is a regime, a Hamas regime that just a week.
I like that, the assumption is they're all innocent people. They're just less. Look, let's watch that again. Sorry, I'm trying to set up some stream stuff. Let's watch that again.
All those 2,000 were Hamas combatants. I'd say to you, good. That's who we want to kill. But of course, the Hamas Ministry of Health isn't telling you how many were combatants and how many were civilians. And of course, they're telling you, their impression is, oh, they're all innocent people. No. You have to be skeptical. This is a regime,
let's be skeptical,
a Hamas regime that just a week ago, you saw the sort of brutality it's capable of doing.
Don't get me wrong, some of them will be Hamas. In a sense, he's right. Some of them definitely will be Hamas fighters. We don't know how many that is. There's no way it's 2,000. These are in built-up areas. They're blowing up houses. They're blowing up massive apartment blocks. It's just not. I'd be shocked if it was even half were Hamas militants. Do you know what? I'd be happier, because it's fair enough if they shoot Hamas terrorists after what happened. It's not fair enough if they're bombing old ladies.
And yet you're believing its press releases.
Can the US president still come tomorrow? I see you've just put out a media note about the timings of his meetings with Mr. Netanyahu. It's best he doesn't come, isn't it?
I disagree. I disagree. And it's not just he's coming. Your prime minister, the British prime minister is supposed to come. The French president is supposed to come. The German chancellor was here today. And the truth is, the world has been outraged, not by Hamas propaganda, but by Hamas's actions. The world has been outraged by the brutal massacre of innocent people on October 7th. The world has been outraged by the beheadings, by the ISIS-type violence, by the lining up of people and shooting them in pits, the murdering of babies. the kidnapping of some 200 people and abducting them back to that is the true story here, not Hamas's propaganda. And this sort of false equivalence between a democratic society that is defending itself from a terrorist threat and between a group of ISIS. The world has been outraged by the beheadings, by the ISIS-type violence.
Like, I do question should the news do that, but it's good that they just juxtapose it. Because you kind of think, should they just... they are trying to make a point. Should they tell you what to think? But on the other hand, it's good that they have Mark Regev on next to all of this. Because again, a lot of what he's saying this time was about the hospital bombing was true. However, it's important to remember he does try to excuse a lot of the
by
stuff
the lining up of people and shooting them in pits, the murdering of babies, the kidnapping of some 200 people and abducting them back to that is the true story here, not Hamas's propaganda. And this sort of false equivalence between a democratic society that is defending itself from a terrorist threat and between a group of ISIS-type terrorists who butcher Israelis and treat their own people, the people they claim to represent, even worse.
Well, so Mohammed Abbas, the Palestinian leader, has already pulled out of that four-way meeting in Amman, in Jordan. We'll see what happens with the Egyptian president, even King Abdullah of Jordan. We'll see what happens with that. You know, this idea of consensus over meeting Joe Biden is already falling apart. You know, the moral equivalence of what happened in that terrible, terrible day on October the 7th, does that allow one war crime to follow another?
I disagree. There's no comparison. You're saying they commit war crimes, we commit war crimes, we're all equally bad. That's not true. Can I remind you that when the international community united to fight ISIS, yes, ISIS controlled territory. In that territory, there were cities. Famously in Mosul, in 2016, in defeating ISIS, there were, unfortunately, civilian casualties. But defeating ISIS was the goal, and the world is better with ISIS defeated. It's the same with Hamas. We are trying to avoid civilian casualties. The people of Gaza are not our targets. Hamas is our target. Hamas is responsible for this war. Israel is responding to violence that was inflicted upon it. We are targeting Hamas's military machine. We don't want to see innocent civilians caught up in the crossfire. I'd like to be able to tell you at Sky News that we can promise there won't be a single civilian hurt in this war. But you know that's impossible. There hasn't been a war in modern history where civilians haven't been caught up in the crossfire. But what I can say as the representative of a democratic society, we will make every effort. We will make every effort to minimize civilian casualties. Hamas, however, does the opposite. When we ask Palestinians to leave combat areas... You may want to do that,
but it is not happening. It is not happening.
Why do you say that? Because you believe Hamas propaganda that Israel is responsible for these deaths? That's the basis of your
Are you saying that every image we see on our television screens has been fabricated from somewhere else, that every child we see pulled from rubble and taken to a hospital running out of supplies is a fake picture?
And in Mosul, there weren't difficult pictures as well. War is very, very difficult. We don't want to see civilian casualties. But who is responsible for this war?
Are you saying, there is collateral damage of civilians, or are you not saying that?
I am saying the civilian population of Gaza is suffering. I am saying that there are civilian casualties. I'm saying we are making a maximum effort to minimize those casualties, as Britain does when it fights wars. We don't want to see civilian casualties. But we cannot allow Hamas to have immunity, just as you didn't give ISIS immunity when you defeated it in 2016 in Mosul. Don't judge Israel by a standard you don't judge yourself. That's not fair.
Well, you know, that was led by Iraqi and Kurdish forces in Mosul. I happened to be there
with British support, correct? With British support, British air power. No, I think the British did the right thing in defeating Hamas, in defeating ISIS. They did the right thing. They saved the world from evil people. ISIS had a territorial caliphate in Iraq and Syria. But can't you understand that Hamas has got the same sort of terror enclave? They've taken over territory. They've butchered our people. They treat the people of Gaza terribly. It's time Hamas was finished. We will destroy their military machine and we will dismantle their political structure. And in doing so, We are actually doing a favor to the people of Gaza.
In destroying Hamas, you will destroy Gaza. Do you accept that is
I don't accept that. I don't accept. I don't accept
your
that.
campaign? Well,
I don't accept that.
You yourself
I think
say
that
Hamas
I don't
hides
accept
in
the rationale.
hospitals, that they use human shields to protect themselves. So how do you get to Hamas without killing civilians, which is what seems to be happening?
So we are going to make a maximum effort to
What's
hit the
maximum
Hamas
effort mean?
machine
It doesn't mean anything.
without
maximum effort.
doing what we can to avoid civilian casualties. Are you telling me
How many
that
apartment blocks have been destroyed in
may I
Gaza
please
already?
answer? Allow me to
Your
answer the
satellite
question. Are you
surveillance could probably
saying
count
that
for
Hamas
you
has
how many
immunity?
apartment buildings you have destroyed, how many civilian buildings you have destroyed in Gaza City
We don't target
of the
civilian
Gaza Strip.
structures. That is incorrect what you've said. We don't target civilian structures.
We target Hamas structures in civilian
So
structures.
what are those
Hamas
high-rise buildings
targets
we've
in
seen
Gaza.
destroyed? In Beit
missiles.
They are
Hanun on the
Hamas
border that I've seen
targets.
with my own.
That's like really so we don't target mass structures. There's just a load of militants firing off the top of a skyscraper. So we bomb that. So we bomb the militants, and it just so happens
They are Hamas targets.
What, all of the buildings?
What we target are Hamas strongholds. And here you have to understand, and please let me finish a sentence. Hamas embeds itself under the civilian population, under the city of Gaza.
So
There's
to
a
kill
network
every
of
single one
tunnels.
of like everybody in Hamas, you're going to have to kill a lot of civilians. So sometimes the cost can be, sometimes the cost of something can just be far too great for it to actually be justified.
There are rocket sites to launch rockets to attack our people. There are arms depots. There are command and communications. Hamas has got a subterranean, under civilian neighborhoods. They have a huge military machine. Now, are you saying that Israel is supposed to give them immunity? No, we've asked the civilians to leave the area. But we're doing what Britain would do in our case.
There has to be another way. There has to. Don't bring Britain into this. There has to be another way.
The other way is to give Hamas immunity. That's the other way, to allow these butchers to kill our people and just turn the other cheek. Would you do that in Britain?
That's it. Obliterate Gaza or nothing. Those are the two options.
This is not about Britain. This is about what you are doing.
It's Israelis dying. So
the
then we're not
areas
so worried.
in Gaza which have been flattened, which is the homes
you
of
are holding
civilians.
Israel to
even in
you are
Khan
holding
Yunis,
Israel,
where you're asking people to
Israel
flee,
to a stand.
there have been airstrikes.
You are holding Israel to a standard
Continue.
that you don't hold your own country to. That's the truth. That's the truth.
I'm just saying
We are
that this is not
responding
about
to
Britain
violent,
now. This is
barbaric
about
terrorism.
Final thought. When will you be able to give your truth that you say this was not an
argument? Why someone goes, yeah, no, I do. I condemn it. I think it's disgusting. How dare they intervene? Whether you're speaking to Corbyn or someone.
strike by Israel?
Who's against all foreign.
I hope as soon as possible. But I urge you, why are you believing Hamas propaganda? At least be skeptical.
Yeah, I was right. Be skeptical because, again, sorry, we got a little distracted with that. But so as the day's gone on, what we started to see is more evidence coming out.
We did an immediate review with all relevant branches of the IDF. This is what took place on Tuesday, October 17th. At 6:15 p.m., a barrage of rockets was fired by Hamas to Israel. Then, at 6:59 p.m., a barrage of around 10 rockets was fired by Islamic Jihad from a nearby cemetery. It was at the time that 6:59 p.m. when there were reports of an explosion at the Al-Hali al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza City. According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened. They went as far as inflating the numbers of casualties. They understood with absolute certainty that it was a rocket misfired by Islamic Jihad that damaged the hospital. Analysis of our aerial footage confirmed
So several like open source intelligence people and people who study this have been claiming that this does seem to look more like some kind of rocket. I have absolutely no idea. Many people have been making their own claims. I still can't remember if it was Bosch or Hasan go, well, it doesn't look like any kind of rocket I've seen. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. I know what a missile fired from Israel looks like. I don't know what a missile fired from a rocket looks like. I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. So this is the IDF making these claims. These appear to have been independently verified to some extent.
That there was
but there
no
is debate.
direct hit to the hospital itself. The only location damage is outside the hospital in the parking lot, where we can see signs of burning, which I will show later, no cratering, and no structural damage to nearby buildings, as opposed to the damage caused by any aerial munition, which would have been of different nature. We would have seen craters and structural damage to the buildings, both of which haven't been identified in this incident. The size of the damage we see here is due to the warhead of the Islamic Jihad rocket, but most of the rocket's propellant is still evident due to the short flight of the rocket because the launch failed. The following visual evidence shows infrared imagery of the parking lot. You can see the central locations of fires, some debris of rooftops, no craters can be identified. I want to show you that.
So this was the argument. Now, to be fair, if you look at the damage Israel usually does, this doesn't seem consistent with that in terms of it's normally surrounding buildings smashed, even if it, like, I mean, they cause huge amounts of damage. But again, I am in no way qualified to be definitive on that.
Myself. This is the area of the hospital. Okay? We are showing the parking lot and the hospital. Okay? Those are in red spots. This is not in infrared, so you can understand it betterly. This is the parking lot. This is the parking lot. You can see the parking lot also now in this picture shown here. Okay? Aftermath. After the hit. There is no structural damage to the building. The walls stayed intact. There are no craters here. All of the above, which I said, no structural damage. The walls stay intact, no craters. These are the characterized that shows that it's not an aerial munition that have hit the parking lot. We also have examples of what air-to-ground munition creator looks like. As you can see, they do not exist in this instance. Many media outlets immediately reported the unverified claims by Hamas. Those were lies spread by Hamas. I want to make something clear. It is impossible to know what happened as quickly as Hamas claimed they knew. That should have been an initial warning sign for many. Unlike Hamas, the IDF launched an immediate examination, which was overseen at the very highest levels of command. This professional review was based on intelligence, operational systems, and aerial footage, all of which we cross-checked. The evidence, which we are sharing with you all, confirms that the explosion of the Ali al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza was...
This cracked me up. Right now, my heart goes out to all the people on X affected by the fact that Israel didn't bomb the hospital. I can't imagine what you're going through right now, what that much disappointment must feel like. Praying Israel does bomb a hospital soon so you can save face. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know if he turns out to be some like rabid nutcase just to hedge my bets. Anyway, that was funny.
caused by an Islamic Jihad rocket that was misfired.
بقول لك أول مرة بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه فبقول لك تبع الجهاد الصواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي هاي. إيه؟
Okay, so I think Channel 4 did a good analysis of some of the claims. Channel 4 did a good analysis.
If the atmosphere in the region was already incendiary.
45 minutes. I'm not watching that. Let's crack on with it. So anyway, of course, right, all the Twitter leftists that you would imagine were first saying it was, were first saying it absolutely, definitely was, repeating that it was definitely Israel. And then we're just like, yeah, but okay, but Israel has done it in the past. So they bombed a school. It doesn't matter. Ignoring the fact they spread misinformation. Right? I'm sure Israel did bomb a school. Again, Israel bombs civilian targets. Whatever Mark Regev wants to claim. You know, they bomb Hamas targets in civilian targets and then claim they only bomb Hamas targets. So I'm not excusing them, but all of these people were spreading misinformation. Now Hasan has now gone on Piers Morgan. Right, so Hasan's gone on Piers Morgan, which is, I suppose, quite big for Hasan, really. I don't think he's ever been on a show that big before. So I suppose that's pretty huge in and of itself. And from what I hear, he's not exactly done that good of a job. I tried to stay clear of clips because I was like, I want to react on stream just raw to this. So let's see if Hasan is sensible and doesn't spread misinformation.
Well, now the battle of the hearts and minds traditionally played out.
And again, I want to be clear, we still don't 100% know exactly what happened with the bomb. I'm not saying Israel's story is definitely true. I'm sure there's elements that exaggerate. So,
through diplomacy and propaganda is being played out online. My next guest.
We don't know yet. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this. I'm just talking over it.
Well, now the battle of the hearts and minds traditionally played out through diplomacy and propaganda is being played out online. My next guest has almost 500 million views for his provocative commentary online, making him hugely influential. Hasan Piker streams live under the name Hasan Abi. His analysis of the Israel-Hamas war has taken a highly critical stance towards Israel and Western media, and he's been calling me out for my coverage.
Because he only cares about Israeli citizens. He does not care about Palestinians as human beings. That's why it's apples to oranges. It's like one side is a human, the other side is a barbaric monster child.
I never said that, obviously. He says that he'd like nothing more than to come on to Uncensored and call me a baboon in a suit to my face. Well, here I am, a baboon, and he can join me now. I'm joined by Hasan. Hasan, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Piers Morgan is a dick, but that was actually quite funny.
Thank you for having me, Piers. It's very early here in Los Angeles, California, but I'm going to try to do my very best to not do my British accent while I'm here.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, I appreciate you coming on. Explain to me why you consider me a stenographer for the Israeli government, given that in the last week, I think more than any other host in the world, I have given lengthy platforms to pro-Palestinian voices to articulate that side of the argument.
No, I do have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices.
I wonder if he's going to be as mealy-mouthed as he was with the Hasan shit. Not the Hasan shit, he's Hasan. When it was with the Ethan Klein debate. Remember when Hasan was talking, like the debate we watched the other week, or last week, when he talked to Ethan Klein and was trying to play off his audience of people who say crazy shit supporting Hamas, and Ethan, who is a genuinely compassionate person and cares about people suffering on both sides. And so it's very condemnatory of Israel, was absolutely condemnatory of Hamas as an atrocity. And Hasan, with him, every time he tried to go, so will you just, okay, can we just agree that this was bad? And bear in mind, Ethan was crying at stories of Palestinian fathers with dead babies. And he said, look, Hasan, can we just agree that chopping up kids in a kibbutz and a farm, going to a rave and raping people and murdering them, that's wrong? And that sounds like, yeah, I mean, definitely, but I mean, you've got to look at it like this. You've got to look at it like this. And just, but, and then pivoted to something else or tried to change the subject and just kind of waffled and rambled and gave these almost politician answers. You know, like when you ask a politician a question and they go, well, you know, I think the real thing that people want to know about is, and then talk about something different. And he's like, well, and it was literally like that. Well, you know, you got to remember that actually the real problem is that, and he just wouldn't, because he was trying to play, he just wouldn't even say anything clear because he didn't want to upset all Ethan's people. He was hiding his power level. And then with his own audience, he doesn't want to upset them because they want him to say crazy shit and leap to conclusions like he did over the bomb and everything. Anyway, let's crack on.
I have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices than the rest of the British media and certainly the rest of Western media in general. Now, as far as saying that you're a stenographer, I said that journalists are not supposed to be stenographers, and yet when it comes down to it, in most circumstances, in whatever conflict we may be in, there are stenographers for whichever party is aligning with the American State Department and the interests of the West in general. And Israel happens to be the one in this ongoing conflict.
But it's interesting that you call me a propagandist, because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got
I'm
bombed.
a propagandist.
Well, no,
for the record.
I'm not calling
I'm a
you that.
propagandist.
I'm just saying. I'm going to play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay, well then I want to
I'm saying I am.
I just
before
want to
you
put
even play it.
What's he doing? At least he admits to being a propaganda. I mean, you can make an argument that isn't all trying to convince people propaganda. If you have a position, you try and advocate for that. Is that propaganda? If you want to define it like that, then yeah, propaganda is neutral and it can be good sometimes. It depends what, you know. So I suppose that's true. You know what? I'll give that to Hasan. In a way, propaganda can be neutral, right? If someone's doing, but to me, propaganda always, there's an element of falseness in it, right? It's not, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's not a good definition, but to me, if you're talking about propaganda, that means that there's some dishonesty or misrepresentation or something like that there. Not just that you're advocating for a particular position. But if you want to say, hey, well, propaganda is just advocacy, okay, fine. Then it's morally neutral. In the way I use, maybe I'm wrong. I should look up at it. Who cares? I'm arguing nonsense about.
Okay, I'm going to play the clip. This is your reaction to the bombing of the hospital the other night.
While I was in the process of getting ready for the stream, Israel enacted one of the singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming.
It immediately spread misinformation. To be fair to Hasan, though, this is the thing. To be somewhat fair to Hasan, so did most major news organisations, Channel 4, the BBC. They all jumped to it. And again, I understand that Israel bombed hospitals before. There was an explosion. Oh God, sorry. There was a hospital explosion. I understand it, but the news shouldn't do that. They shouldn't go, well, they've done it before, so it must be them. They need to check. You need more info. Just wait. I don't understand what's actually cost from going, hey, a hospital's gone up. We're not sure exactly why yet. There are competing claims. Israel has denied that it's fired the missile. Oh, for God's sake. Sorry, one of the buttons came off on the keyboard. I'm trying to put it back on, but it's the fucking 0, so it just goes back every time. Anyway, let's just crack on. I don't need a 0. Let's just
conflict.
But it's interesting that you call me a propagandist, because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got bombed.
I'm a propagandist.
Well, no.
For the record.
I'm not calling
I'm a
you that. I'm just
propagandist.
saying hospital the other night.
While I was in the process of getting ready for the stream, Israel enacted one of the singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming on air too, and I took a position based probably on 30 years of being a journalist, including running major newspapers, working at CNN and others, of waiting, of just saying, I think we should just wait and see what has actually happened here, get clarification, see who's actually to blame before we start passing judgment. You raced in to assume, as many people did, by the way, including the New York Times, BBC.
I really liked it. I think Hasan, again, I don't know because I haven't watched it yet, but I actually think Hasan might be about to get dressed down. I'm not a fan of Piers Morgan. Some people despise him. I don't despise him, but I've never been a fan of his, right? But I think he is going to like grill. I think he's going to give Hasan a bit of a dressing down for leaping to conclusions from a kind of perspective as a serious journalist. I'd say he's borderline between serious journalist and hack, but still.
Mainstream media and, of course, most of the Arab world then followed that this was clearly, indisputably, an Israeli airstrike on this hospital. And yet all the evidence now suggests very strongly that it wasn't, that in fact this was a rocket that misfired coming from a terrorist group inside Gaza. So my question for you is this. Why would you
I wouldn't go that far,
why
Piers.
would you be so certain?
Well, to be fair, Hasan has got a point. We still don't know 100%, but that is generally where the preponderance of evidence is coming down. That we don't know 100%.
In what you said.
But at least, I mean, I think that might be performative, but if it's not, at least good on Hasan for maybe learning a lesson. I doubt it, though. I doubt it very much.
Before you knew.
Okay. So, first and foremost, before we get started on this conversation, let's understand something very important here. There's no electricity in Gaza. Internet is patchy in Gaza. There's no food in Gaza. There's no water in Gaza. This is all by design. This is because Gaza...
Right, so Israel stopped stuff coming in, and there are definitely shortages, but there is food and water, or people would have died. So he's exaggerating slightly, but I mean, whatever. I'm not going to sit there going, hey, they're only partially starving.
Is under a brutal blockade, a brutal occupation by the Israeli government. Okay? So that plays a role in the fog of war and the misinformation that gets spread. Having said that, however...
It was Israel's fault that Hasan leapt to conclusions. It was their fault. I don't think he can't be blamed. You
made it seem as though there is a certainty that this was 100% not an Israeli airstrike.
No, I didn't.
And instead,
I literally just said it's not a certainty.
Okay, sorry.
I said the evidence is
Then
increasingly pointing to this not being an Israeli airstrike. And that is expert evidence from people who have no skin in the game at all.
Yes. Well, I don't know which expert you're talking about, because I think Channel 4 did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact, I would say Channel 4 did probably the best job so far in analyzing everything that the IDF has said. But the reason why I believed, and I still do believe, that the likelihood is that this was an Israeli bombing campaign wasn't only because of the singular verifiable video, the phone video from the balcony that had all of the markings of an airstrike. The fact that the Israeli Air Force was enacting a bombing campaign in the region at the time, according to the Al Jazeera live streaming footage that everyone is using but doesn't understand. The fact that the digital media person for the IDF immediately came out and said that this was actually an airstrike that hit a Hamas target and that he was sad.
This wasn't actually a media spokesman. I looked this up at the time. Assuming you're talking about the same person, because I saw people posting, look, this media spokesman for the government. It was a writer for like the Times of Israel or something. It was a journalist. I don't know if it was Times of Israel, but it's one of those types of papers.
That there were casualties at the end of the day, but this was a Hamas target and celebrated it. And more importantly, I guess, the fact that this hospital had been bombed by Israel. This hospital had been bombed by Israel on Saturday. 22 hospitals have, as a matter of fact, been bombed by Israel since this last saga in the occupation. And this hospital had been bombed directly by Israel, where the cancer ward was destroyed. Israel has been bombing all of these hospitals. Israel has been calling all of these hospitals to evacuate over and over and over again. The medical professionals at the hospital had been called by the Israeli government the day prior, and everyone on the ground assumes that this is an Israeli airstrike. They are the ones who experienced
But Hasan,
the
Hasan,
situation.
listen, Hasan,
so when you have
but the
every
truth
single,
is,
can I
the
just
truth
finish
is,
this?
if you watch the
Can I just finish
BBC, if you watch the
Can I-
BBC account of all this last night, by their Verify unit, which was specifically set up by the BBC to be completely dispassionate in these investigations, and they reached a pretty clear conclusion based on circumstantial evidence. I'll make that clear, that this would not have been an Israeli airstrike, including, for example, the size of the crater, which bears no relation to the size of craters normally left by Israeli. So, look, my point is, neither of us know for sure. But you took to your airwaves immediately because actually you're, I wouldn't even say unconscious bias, you're admitting
He's nailing him down. This is quite good.
propagandist bias on your part, was that you wanted that to be an Israeli airstrike. It suited your narrative. And I would say that that in itself, in its way,
wanted it to be an
is being a
Israeli airstrike.
stenographer. Well,
It's a certain way of phrasing it, okay? So I understand what he's like, okay, I don't think Hasan, if you were like, hey, Hasan, push a button and Israel will bomb a hospital. But I think you read something like that and there's a hunger to blame Israel. There's a desire then that you have someone to blame. Again, like what Hasan said, like, has got a point in the sense that, yeah, they've bombed other hospitals. It's not that unbelievable. But,
you know, you accuse me of
you're
being
putting-
a stenographer.
you're putting
I
words
try
in
and
my
be
mouth.
fair and get to the truth. In your case, I don't think you try to do that. I think you appeal to your audience, appeal to your base,
This
and
is
you
unfair.
don't really care whether the facts are there or not.
This is entirely unfair because you just said circumstantial evidence favors that this was not an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I gave you all of the circumstantial evidence that it does favor that this is an Israeli airstrike. The reason why, however, circumstantial evidence is not enough. And the one thing that I will concede to, because when more information did come out, and no, I do not mean when Israel said that they did not bomb this hospital and it was actually Hamas, and then they turned around and went, never mind, it's not Hamas, it's actually Islamic Jihad. And then they said, we have more evidence coming out in a couple hours. And then the evidence came out, and it turns out it sounded like the phone conversations that they were able to intercept, supposedly, sounded like, by experts at the very least, to be completely false and completely made up.
Yeah,
It
but
was not
Hasan,
a
I
Gaza
don't
accent,
think, listen,
syntax
in
was
all
all wrong.
honesty,
Now,
I
now,
don't
wait,
think,
hold
even
on.
as you're
Hold
saying
on,
all
let me
this,
finish.
I think you're a smart guy.
Piers, let me finish.
yeah, but still, you don't know exactly what's gone on. There's some. It's like, oh, okay, this feels fake. So I wonder. So it's starting to look like it could be Israel. Do you see what? Like now, Piers and to be like, and anyone sensible is saying that the preponderance of evidence, it seems like it was a misfiring rocket. But no one's going, right, no, we know it's a misfiring rocket. Everyone lied. Typical, well, I mean, Mark Regev was, but obviously. Right, typical, everyone's blaming Israel. Like, it's obvious, right? No, you maintain caution. It looks like it wasn't Israel. They've bombed at the hospitals. Maybe it was. Currently, the evidence is pointing to it probably wasn't. We don't know enough to make a decision.
You've looked at all of this, and I think in your heart, you know this was probably not an Israeli airstrike. And I'm just curious why you would, instead of admitting that as facts change,
that is
your
not
opinion
what I'm
changed.
saying. That is
but
not what I'm saying at all.
I don't understand why you would
Please.
double and treble down
You're
when the
asking me to be
evidence
on your
is pointing
show.
the other
You're
way.
asking me.
Because he's dishonest and he cares about views more than having integrity. This is one of the worst things. Hasan's not like an evil person. But one of the worst things about having people like Hasan be some of the biggest politics people online is that they lack integrity. And they will say whatever they lack. It's not just like both integrity, and they also will just leap to conclusions and run with a narrative and get excited. So they don't have. So first of all, they don't have the. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have enough caution with stories, because if it seems to validate what they're saying, boom, they're going to run with it. It's all content, right? And this is kind of the thing. Oh shit, something's happened. It's content. I better run with it. I better have a tape that's going to get me the most views. I'm not saying he thinks about it this consciously, but this is where his incentives are. And then he doesn't have the integrity afterwards to then admit he's wrong. He just wants to grandstand and obfuscate and try and weasel his way out of it so he doesn't lose too much clout with his followers.
To be on your show, do you want to talk?
Yes.
If you're asking me to be on your show, and I want to be on the show, thank you so much for having me on your show. Let me explain exactly what I said, and let me explain to you why I think still, to this very moment, until there is a third-party investigation that is concluded, by the UN, the International Criminal Court, or specifically a forensic analyst that that looks at the situation is allowed to be on the ground. This is not just my perspective. This is B'Tselem as well, which is an Israeli organization that has also demanded a third-party investigation occur. I am not going to conclusively say that this was not
I don't
Israel's
expect you to.
fault.
I
Why?
don't expect you to.
Because I just gave you, and not because I'm a propagandist.
Yeah, but he's trying to get you to say what he said. He's trying to get Hasan to just say what Piers was saying, which is that this was, which is say that the current state of evidence makes it look very much like it probably wasn't an Israeli rocket. We don't know, but that's where the evidence is currently leading, right? So why can't Hasan just say this? Because he seems to now have that position, basically. But now he's trying to say, no, you're trying to tell me that I have to, you're trying to tell me now that I have to say it definitely wasn't, when Piers hasn't said that himself.
Me being a propagandist goes, everyone is a propagandist. I'm just honest about it. You're a propagandist. We have our biases.
I'm curious who you think I'm a propagandist
I'm honest
for.
about my biases.
Who do you think I'm a propagandist for?
Who do I think you're a propagandist for? Whichever every media person is doing propaganda.
I could not answer that, could he? Who are you doing propaganda? Well, every media person is doing propaganda is usually for someone or for something. You could just say, well, I think you're a propagandist for it. The thing is, if I was Hasan and I'd accused you of being a propagandist, I would have gone, I think you're a propagandist for Israel now. I don't mean you're being paid. I just think you're running propaganda for them. That's what I would have said if I was Hasan. I don't think Piers is doing that, but that is what I would say if I were Hasan.
Who for? I've got to be doing it for somebody.
You think it's a bad word. I don't. That's just the difference. This is a semantics
I do. I think it's actually quite a serious charge.
Hasan,
I think it's a serious charge to level, not on a podcast.
Yeah, because again, you'd usually feel like propaganda had connotations of being bad. If someone says you're doing propaganda, there's usually an implication of dishonesty, an implication that you're trying to get me to believe something that isn't true. Even if maybe in the strictest definition, that's not what it means. And that we could say, well, if you're trying to make persuasive pictures, memes, videos, whatever, maybe, okay, fine. Like, maybe it might not mean that, but that's what people mean. If I say you're doing propaganda, I usually mean that there's some kind of dishonesty, right? Surely that's what people mean. And I kind of even wonder if now Hasan's weaseling out of it, just to not offend Piers, because he's like, shit, I can get on Piers Morgan. I better be nice to him, so he has me on again. And I'm not 100% accusing him of that, because again, I don't know. But I do fucking wonder.
But as a journalist who's broadcasting around the world, who has a reputation, I believe, for being fair and impartial, actually, on these issues, it's quite a charge to just say, I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I'm doing the propaganda for.
While we're having this conversation, 3,000... Piers, while we're having this back and forth, 3,800 and...
Change the subject. You notice that? Look. He totally did the politician thing and just changed the subject. Piers says it reckon. Who do you think I'm a propagandist for? Well, Piers, while we're sitting here talking...
I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I'm doing the propaganda for.
While we're having this conversation, 3,000... Piers, while we're having this back and forth,
literally running away like a politician.
3,840 Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in the last incursion into Gaza. I feel like this is an incredibly selfish, self-centered conversation to have.
Oh no, it's extremely important. First of all, that's so fucking Weasley to try and get, this conversation isn't important about whether I'm spreading misinformation. Second of all, like the spread of misinformation when there's a catastrophe like this, there's thousands dead, there's like thousands dead now on both sides. Usually, to be fair, it is smaller on the Israeli side. I mean, it's still smaller, but there's like 1,500 dead. There's 3,800 Palestinians killed, most of them civilians, a lot of them kids. Do you know what I mean? And you're going to sit there and say, I'm going to spread misinformation and it's fine. And if I'm just like saying whatever, I'm spreading misinformation, that's not really the issue. No, bloody important. That's the main issue. You shouldn't be spreading misinformation at a time like this. We need accuracy and we need calmness. One thing we need more than anything else is calmness, and calls for everybody to calm down, try and like make peace, try and figure out what's going on in the region, how like not just spreading propaganda to rile everyone up. That's definitely really bad because there's thousands dead. Because of that, it makes it worse.
Asked me to be on here. You wanted to hear my perspective. I'm willing to give it to you. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Noam Chomsky style manufacturing consent conversations about how the media is operating at the behest of capital.
You were the guy. Listen, you were the guy that called me.
There are dead people.
Listen, Hasan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon.
I love that. Maybe I'm bringing Piers up too much. I'm like, I have issues with Piers Morgan. I'm not trying to dick right down, but I do just love the way he did that. Like, you know, when you're at school and you start making excuses to the teacher. No, but Mitch, you don't understand, because actually, like, it wasn't me, it was Stephen. He was, if anything, he was really doing. Ben, please, Hasan, please. Yeah, sorry.
Listen, Hasan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon in a suit. I was curious as to why. You don't want to say who I'm doing the propaganda for. We'll move on.
Some of this is gold.
Move on. I agree with you. There's a bigger picture here. Let's move on. Let's take a short break. Hasan, let's take a short break. I want to come back. I want to talk to you about what happened on October the 7th, get your reaction to that. Welcome back. Hasan Piker is still with me. Hasan, I want to just play you a clip of something that you said about the October 7th terror attacks, and in particular, the attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, like, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hasan, that you are in some ways...
Eventually, when you realize open-air prison your whole day happened on its happen.
The attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, like, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break.
Well, hopefully I wouldn't rape people, and if I did, yeah, it's still bad. Usually when people do bad things, it's because, like, their lives are shit. Like, not always. It doesn't always work out like that, but that's usually why it's happening.
Out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hasan.
Otherwise, that kind of excuses everything. Like, again, the Israelis vote for right-wing governments that do crimes against the Palestinians because they're constantly under threat of terrorism. Everything that both sides do is explicable. It just doesn't justify it. Right? Because you could make the same argument. Yeah, but could you imagine? The Israelis do it all the time. They go, yeah, but if any country is under threat terrorism, what they do? And it's like, well, yeah, okay, obviously that's true, but it doesn't justify it. Just saying, yeah, other countries would vote for far-right governments. Well, yeah, it doesn't make it okay. You know, in the same way, it doesn't make it okay that Palestinians are chopping people to bits, that are, like, massacring people. It's not going to make it okay because Hasan said, yeah. It's not going to make it okay because they're in a bad situation. It doesn't justify it.
That you are in some way saying they had it coming. Were you?
No, I wouldn't say that they had it coming. I think that Michael Brooks used to say, analysis is not justification. And while obviously civilian casualties and horrific barbaric acts that were committed on October 7 are completely unacceptable, the important thing to make sure that it never happens again is to analyze what are the conditions as to how it happened to begin with. And I think Ehud Barak is going to be on in a little bit as well, or maybe he's on before me. Yeah. And I'm almost certain that while he has held the keys to the conversation and held the levers of the power in this conversation in many key and critical points, I would go so far as to say that he is among many others who also recognize that the Bibi Netanyahu administration is responsible. This is not just my assessment. This is 85% of the Israeli population's assessment at the time. This is years and years and years of refusing to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority. Don't take my word for it. Take Bibi Netanyahu's personal word for it.
I would agree again.
In a closed-door conversation with Likud members, he said that if you want to thwart any kind of Palestinian nation state, you must do everything you can to only negotiate with Hamas. We control how high the fire goes. He has given cash to Hamas by way of Qatar. There is no bigger fan of Hamas than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe interview.
I think that's silly. People keep saying, like, oh, he's a big fan. No, they thought, which was stupid. I don't know why anyone would have thought that for some reason, Israel thought they could use Hamas years ago to drive a wedge between Palestinians. They thought they were a good counterbalance to the PLO, which is fucking insane. Like, I'm scared of next door's dog, so I've got a tiger. Yeah, it's going to tear you to shreds, mate.
And then you'll ask him to.
No, I actually did interview him a few months ago, and I
government.
did actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview, than Israelis, and what he intended to do about it. He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility, which is now this hot phrase in this whole crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a
well, let
question?
me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu when they would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a
well, let
question?
me just finish my point. If they do then launch a
that?
ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace, and I think it has fractured society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer for his government. My question for you, I think, is this, is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively, I mean, I don't even call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gaza.
This is why I call you a propagandist.
I'm just saying the phraseology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and
but it's not
so on and so on. I get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't...
Okay, but wait, hold on. A minute ago, he just said that Israel is occupying it, right? This is the problem. They don't use right terminology. Israel's occupying the West Bank. It's not occupying Gaza. It is putting Gaza under siege. This is bad. This is something that's been doing my head in for a while on this issue and a lot of issues generally. That there are a lot of. I think this is worse on the left, where they'll just use a series of words that don't really apply well, right? Like they call what's going on in Gaza a genocide. It's really bad. It's not genocide. Even the use of apartheid, which I agree does make sense. I think it's as silly to call it an apartheid, but even there, it is materially different. It's not quite the same thing, but I don't think it's necessarily, and certainly what goes in the West Bank is no better. But I just don't understand why they have to use these other words that are either exaggerating or in some cases, like, it's not even necessarily better than what they're talking about. It's just not that thing. Like, it's something different.
That's why they call it the world's largest open-air prison.
Yeah, but Hasan, I don't disagree with you. And I've pointed this out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen, where 1,400 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded, it was reported, and so on. If we can't look at that collectively, with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find that the tribalism on both sides is now so toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors.
Listen, I'm going to, Piers has done well in this interview, right? I'm sorry. There's many times I've disliked him. This isn't actually one of them. Like, he is spot on that. Like, the tribalism, and I've thought this for years and years and years, because it's been going on for a long time, that the tribalism on both sides of people in this country and in the West who are discussing the Israel-Palestine issue is so vicious and so just over the top that there's no way, like, both sides have this: either Israel's the most saintly country in the world and the Palestinians are all terrorists and, oh, everyone's so horrible to Israel, or Israel's the most evil, depraved, genocidal, maniacal, fascist. And, like, there's no room for dialogue and debate. If you try, I've tried it. I've been talking to pro-Palestinians, and bear in mind, I'm pretty critical of Israel, certainly of Netanyahu's government, and talking to them, and you can't, because the second you say anything that's in disagreement, they accuse you of a genocide denier. You're worse than the Nazis. A guy today called me a genocide denier and then blocked me because I was responding to another guy who basically was saying, "Oh, all pro-genocide people are afraid. Oh, we're afraid to go out of our house," referring to, like, Jews being afraid of anti-Semitic attacks, which have been happening all over the West. So, yeah, I actually really despise both sides of the discussion in Western countries, because it's just hyperbole and extremism. And to be fair, at the moment, that does seem to be worse on the pro-Palestinian side, but I've seen Ben Shapiro calling for the flattening of Gaza. So I'm not going to excuse the pro-Israeli side either.
Right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks that precipitated this. And I find that really hard, right? Really hard to accept.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay, here's what I would honestly say about that. Is Israel not allowed to defend itself from the worst terror?
Okay, now Piers big of a voice. I'm trying to whistle his way out of that. It's an important question, because it's like, what do Israel actually do? Because when I sit here criticising them, and then it's like, well, what are they actually supposed to do? Because remember, in any democratic country, it's impossible to have an attack like that and not respond militarily. You can wish it was different. You can wish humans were different. I promise you, it doesn't matter where in the world we are. Something like that happens, there's going to be demand for a military response amongst the people. So how do you conduct that in a situation like Gaza? What do you do? I mean, I think probably not bombing the schools and hospitals and refugees, but then, okay, what do you do? Like, it's a real tough one, to be fair.
Attack we've seen since 9/11. Is it not allowed to defend itself
it's just odd.
after 1,400 people in Israel are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are able to defend themselves, as any free democratic country,
that is the
then
Israeli
the question
State
becomes,
Department line.
Hasan,
that is the IDF's line.
Hasan,
that is the line that everyone
Hasan, let me ask you
channeled.
this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves? If their mission now is to get rid of Hamas, a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No.
It's not even listening to him. Like, it looked like he's just looking at his feeler. Like, it wasn't
the
even
worst
listening.
acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that.
It looked like
isn't
he was
it?
looking at his phone then.
I'm sorry, that has committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim,
I realise I do that on stream, but sometimes. But come on.
then what they are doing is
Piers,
consistent
but
with that,
he's still doing
isn't
it.
it?
He's still
As
doing it
a
then.
terror organisation
Maybe
that's
you should look
committed
it
one of the
down.
worst acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's ongoing. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news and
Since when? In all fucking channels, him covering breaking news. Since when? Was this a Hasan policy? Has anyone? Has anyone seen Hasan go, hey, let's wait and see. Let's wait, everyone. Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone, listen. Right, I know it looks like something's happened that confirms all of our biases, but let's not jump to conclusions. I'm not even going to cover this until we know what's going on. Can anyone find me an example of Hasan saying that? Because I've never fucking seen it.
sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, you know, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization, calls the permit regime, where every waking moment of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank, occupying force in the form. This is international law.
Because it seems like
People do a much better stream who
stated aim. Comes a question of how can they defend themselves?
We've
If
been
their
going back
mission
here.
now
Was
is to
Hasan
get rid of
rambling for that
Hamas,
long?
a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything.
Millions of followers. This is what I mean about integrity. It has millions of followers. I'm sorry, you can't just do that. This is the fucking Joe Rogan argument. Hey, I'm just a big idiot. Who cares if I just have like fascists on and agree with them? That was Joe Rogan saying that. Hasan doesn't have fascists on. But if like, I want to find that. Where is that Joe? I'm going to find that. Where is that? Right, because I'm telling you, Joe Rogan's that's literally the Joe Rogan defense. He's doing the Joe Rogan defense. We're going to find that now. Joe Rogan. There you go. Okay, I can't find it. Okay, I can't find it. But nevertheless, like this is the Joe Rogan defense.
As it's ongoing, I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news, and sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people. Let me just say this: better job than most other news outlets of everything as it's ongoing. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news, and sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So
what? Wait, he's now trying to have it both ways. So 1 minute he's just a harmless idiot One minute he's just a harmless idiot, doing his Twitch stream, throwing his ideas out into the ether, and also he did a better job of most news outlets at covering this kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm just going to leave that one out. Do I need to provide everything? Do I need to do a whole deep dive of Hasan and how he isn't on the same level as like CNN or the BBC or like the Times or something? Do we need to go into that? Why Hasan is not better than most news outlets? Oh, how did he do that? How did he start of the sentence he's an idiot and you don't need to take anything said seriously, but he also does it at the end of the sentence is him doing a better job than most news outlets.
So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization, calls the permit regime, where every waking moment of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank are absolute hell, where they have no legal recourse. 51 Palestinians have died, and that was before the Ramallah protest that happened last night, and the Israeli forces were opening up with live fire on protesters last night. So who knows what that death toll has become? This is all a product of Israel being an apartheid state. This is a violent apartheid state. There is no way to be a peaceful
Hasan,
apartheid
let me ask you
state.
this.
It is a violence.
Let
it
me
is a
ask you
violence
this, then.
required for its maintenance.
Okay, listen.
And that violence is frustrating people.
I hear
that
you.
violence
I
is
hear you.
radicalizing people.
But here's
Hold
my-
on.
I hear
as
you.
far as Israel, as far as what Benjamin Netanyahu has done, as far as the war government, what they have done, Piers, going into Gaza and bombing Gaza and killing 3,480 Palestinians so far in Gaza, 1,000 plus children out of all of those casualties, 22 hospitals being bombed, a bakery, the only remaining intact bakery, being bombed yesterday. These are horrifying crimes that you would openly say are horrifying and unjustifiable when Russia does it, but when Israel does it, Israel has a right to defend itself. This is identical to the same talking points that I've heard from every Israeli administration official. It's the same talking points that I've heard from American politicians championing the exact same talking points. It's the same thing that I've heard from everyone else in the media. You might have been against the Iraq.
And the thing is, a lot of what it's saying isn't even wrong. It's just, what's that got to do with what should Israel do now? Does it have a right to defend itself? How should it defend itself from this kind of terrorism? Well, it's their fault. It's come out of like all of the oppression. Yeah, the oppression's terrible. Israel does terrible things. Of course, that provides. So Israel does a lot of like oppression of Palestinians. Of course, yeah, some of them get fall prey to Hamas and start supporting them. However, right? How is that an answer to the question? What is Israel supposed to do? I mean, I'm not even really sure about that, because I'd be interested in his view. He has no idea. He doesn't know what they're supposed to do because he doesn't need to think about it, because no one on his side is ever going to ask what should Israel do in response to this. They're always just going to say, oh, well, this is their fault. Look at the oppression. That's why this has happened. Without ever saying, well, okay, here's what, if I was in charge of Israel, I would do.
War, and you use that, but you're using that for evil, in my opinion, at this point. If you are not sitting here and condemning those acts of war crimes, those acts of violence, those acts of collective punishment.
Well, I would say to that I think the death of any child in this conflict is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the question comes down to me that after an act of terror, as we saw on October the 7th, Israel should be able to defend itself and should be able to go after the people that
I
perpetrated.
wonder if Hasan will answer, or he'll just ramble again. He'll ramble and try and obfuscate like a kind of liar politician. Let's see. Let's find out.
Who live amongst civilians
Maybe he'll give a really clear
in
answer
Gaza deliberately.
this time.
And the question for me becomes down to what is proportionate. I don't know the answer, Hasan. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that answer is.
I do know the answer to that. I do know the answer to that. Last night I had Dr. Ofer Kassif, an Israeli Knesset member who was expelled, suspended for 45 days for saying what I believe is the truth. Championing the exact same position of the Haaretz's editorial board. There are a lot of thoughtful people, a lot of formative Holocaust scholars, a lot of historians that all agree on the same point. The reason why violence that even penetrates through the Israeli security blanket that people thought existed, that penetrated through that Iron Dome, the Iron Wall, if you want to call it that, is because of years and years of...
So he's not going to answer, he's just going to repeat himself, and it's because of years and years of repression. Yeah, sure, okay. So what should Israel do then? So what should Israel do? That was the question, right? So therefore, they should what?
Oppression and years of violence, which is a necessity to maintain an apartheid state. And this has to stop. There's only two ways out of this. Either you engage in full-blown ethnic cleansing, and if you listen to the likes of Smotrich, or if you listen to the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and these very unfavorable, unpopular, far-right figures, if you listen to Netanyahu and his Likud government, they say that they are interested in going in that direction, the ethnic cleansing direction, the ethnic displacement direction, or the only way out of this.
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush, okay? I mean, Ben-Gvir, for a start. Ben-Gvir is an absolute lunatic who calls himself a proud fascist. And there's definitely been some kind of genocidally sounding rhetoric out of some Israeli ministers. I don't think they will do a genocide. I do worry. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that rhetoric's not real. I don't understand what that's got to do with what Israel should do, though, which is what Hasan's been asked twice now.
Or a real solution is
to literally doing the politician thing of just going to ramble into a new point.
Move towards peace, to genuinely end the blockade, to end the apartheid, to end the occupation, and create a pathway towards citizenship for all people with a right to return, for all 14 million Palestinians, 5 million of which live under Israeli occupation. It's brutal. And then the rest living in diaspora. These are not unreasonable requests. These are requests that understand the dignity and the humanity of one side and does not simply treat them as their colonial subjects.
Hasan,
and it's the only way to create permanent security and prosperity in the region.
If it was as simple as that, I'm sure that would have happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would probably lead to a genocide of Israelis. This is the problem. It's not easy. Nothing about that situation is easy. It annoys me when right-hoids pretend that, it's really easy, Israel's completely right, should just obliterate Gaza. Disgusting. Right? And then when silly leftoids like Hasan go, it's really easy, Israel should just disband. They go, we're not going to be a Jewish state anymore. Every Palestinian can come live here. Let's just fingers crossed they're all nice to us. And most of us can just move back to Europe, because apparently this was one of the weird... I'm not accusing Hasan of this. I haven't seen him do this. But a lot of online leftoids started to become these weird race realists. And then all of a sudden, they're posting things about the percentage of Levantine DNA in the average Jew. Seriously. Like, talking about skin tones and the rates of skin cancer in Israelis versus Arabs, and how that you can see that means that they don't... Like, the weirdest, half expected them to start getting the calipers out and measuring the circumference of the radius of someone's fucking nose. It was insane to see leftoids doing this. But anyway, I'm not accusing Hasan of this, but just again, what the fuck are they supposed to do? I don't even know. It's a real tough one, because I'm like, don't bomb civilians, don't bomb Hamas when they're in a hospital. Well, I mean, not that hospital wasn't bombed, but as we established, others were. But on the other hand, what do they do? I think maybe the only thing I could think, and this is me being some schmuck online just thinking, is if they signed international, like as in went to America, said we want to do a big, we're not just going to evacuate northern Gaza, we're going to sign a big treaty saying we give cast iron guarantees that people will be allowed back into Gaza. If we don't, we void any right to aid. All treaties are destroyed with the rest of the world, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So in that case, and then do evacuate Gaza to try and do what you can, do some action against Hamas. Right, don't try. You're not going to be able to eradicate them if you actually let people evacuate. Some Hamas will go with them, so that's not going to work. So evacuate who can be evacuated, but in a way that's more believable to Palestinians, so they're going to be allowed back, so that more of them go, and then go in, do an action against Hamas, try and take out